welcome to another special episode of African Football HQ podcast with Goal Africa. Today we are focusing on Arsenal, and this is going to be a Gunners special. And of course, we are going to be looking at the African stars at Arsenal and predicting what lies in store for them this season. Malek, I know you've been dying to get your teeth into the Gunners and into their African stars. Are you looking forward to this episode? Are you impressed with what you saw in the Community Shield final?
Most definitely. When you look at all the Africans in the Premier League, a lot of the best ones are at Arsenal. So that's a great reason to do this episode. And as for the Community Shield, great win and looking forward to the new season. I'm a little bit of an Arsenal fan, not too strong, but I'm hoping for the best from them.
So I don't think there's anywhere else we can begin but with Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, who was once again the headline act at Wembley, scoring the opener for the Gunners in their 1-1 draw with Liverpool and then netting the decisive penalty after Ryan Brewster had missed his spot kick. Obviously, everyone's talking about the goals, everyone's talking about the winning impact, but how did you rate his overall performance?
Good game. Obviously, it's hard to not talk about that goal. Everything about that was perfect. But I think we should have been doing this for a while now, but I think we need to talk about whether he is the best striker in the Premier League, because I think I could advocate for that.
Advocate for that. Go on. Some would say he's not as well-rounded as Harry Kane. Some would say he didn't score as many as Jamie Vardy in a much weaker team. What is it about him that makes you convinced that he's number one?
I've said this before, but Arsenal without Aubameyang is close to nothing. He's saved them so many times. And so you do have a good point about he's playing with a bit of a weaker side, but in terms of his consistency since coming to Arsenal, even since he's been at Dortmund, he's been immense. He'll go a few games without scoring. He might go on an off goal drought, but when you look at the end of the season, he's always near the top of the goal charts, and that says something. And then with the passing, he's good too.
What would you say to those critics who say that he doesn't offer anything else apart from goals? That's all he is. In terms of his overall contribution, he's not tracking back. He's not covering the fullback. He's not working the channels as he should do. Is that enough for you in a striker, in the Premier League's best striker, as you say, to just be banging them in but doing nothing else for the other 90 minutes?
Why does he need to come back? Does Harry Kane even do any of that?
Well, Harry Kane drops deep really effectively, works the channels. He's always laying balls off. I mean, I would say Harry Kane's passing in the final third is pretty underrated. It's one of his key assets, in my opinion. But we don't see anything really of that kind of team contribution from Aubameyang.
He's a goal scorer at the end of the day. That's what you should value most from the striker. So I think that has to give it to him.
Is he your favourite for Golden Boot this season?
I'd have to say it, especially with this improved Arsenal side. All the focus is going to be on him, especially if Lacazette isn't there.
I think something Aubameyang really proved last season, which now he has silenced the doubters emphatically. There were criticisms about whether he was a big game player, whether he could do it in the tightest matches. It's all well and good scoring against some of the Premier League's lesser lights. But could he do it in the matches that matter most? And when you look at his last three outings at Wembley, the semi-final against Manchester City, the final against Chelsea, then the Community Shield against Liverpool, he scored 5 goals across those 3 matches, including, and then the 6th goal being the penalty in the shootout. So I think certainly he has answered critics definitively that he is not a flat-track bully anymore. And we had a great piece up on goal from Houssem Aouar where he assessed whether it was time for Aubameyang to take Drogba's mantle as the king of Wembley, because Drogba obviously had such an amazing record in FA Cup finals, even in League Cup finals and the Community Shield. But does Aubameyang deserve to be considered in that same breath now?
Not yet, but imagine if he had been at the Premier League scoring 20 goals a season for the past 6 years. And he does that for 5 more.
Well, I think, certainly Arsenal wouldn't have been quite in the mess they're in. I think Arsene Wenger would have perhaps ended his time at the club with a little bit more in the way of tangible success. With Aubameyang, obviously, we can't really talk about him without talking about this ongoing contract situation, the ongoing uncertainty around will he, won't he. It felt a lot like, from my point of view, it felt a lot like deja vu, the kind of comments we were hearing after the Community Shield final. After the FA Cup final, we heard Aubameyang saying, today's not the day to talk about this, we're going to come back at it, look at it in the future. Whereas we had Arteta saying, yeah, definitely, he's going to sign, it's kind of going to be, we're going to get it over the line. And then now, exactly a month on, we've basically still got both men saying the same thing. Aubameyang still saying, we want to focus on the trophy today, we want to focus on the team, we don't want to focus on me. And Arteta's still saying, yeah, it's fine, it's just a matter of time. Am I the only one finding his optimism wearing a little bit hollow?
I don't think it's optimism. I just think that they have a general agreement, but they haven't finalized it yet. Given what Aubameyang and his father have been posting on Twitter and Instagram regarding Arsenal, I have every reason to believe that he's going to resign. And if his asking price really is $250,000 a week, I don't see why they can't match that, really.
But why the delay, and why seemingly the mystery? I mean, when BT Sport asked Aubameyang on Saturday, the first question, I think when they asked, "Are you staying?" his answer was, "We'll have to see. We're going to see," he said. "We're going to see."
I personally hate interview questions like that.
Say yes.
Imagine after playing a game and someone asks you a question like, "Where are you going?" We always see it happen, and they just have to. We know they're going to give some vague answer. It always happens like that.
But if it's as much of a deal as you're saying, then why not just say it? Why evade the question? I mean, it doesn't do any good for Arsenal. It doesn't do any good for your teammates. It doesn't do any good for the fan base to have this kind of uncertainty heading into a new season. And as far as I can see it, there is so much optimism around Arteta's tenure, about the momentum, 2 trophies in a month. There are 2 negatives. One is the ongoing Ozil situation. What happens next? How do they get him off the wage bill? And the second is Aubameyang, this uncertainty about him putting pen to paper. Why not just take responsibility, solve the problem? Or at least, if he'd said, as you're saying, yeah, it's basically a done deal, we just need to get pen to paper, brilliant, happy days. It's a great day for the Gunners. But instead, you've still got this uncertainty, this will he, won't he. We're still talking about it, which is in itself a problem, I think.
Yeah, the Aubameyang situation has really overshadowed Ozil's contract situation. I'd almost completely forgotten about it till you mentioned it. That's probably it might be a bit of a more pressing issue, but I don't think there's a point really talking about whether or not he signed it or what he's about to do. It's out of our hands, and it seems like it's more complicated than Arsenal and Aubameyang are making it seem.
Looking now at another member of that team, Bukayo Saka, there are no concerns anymore about whether he'll stay at Arsenal, having signed a new deal at the end of last term. I am going to make a case. I'm going to make a statement now, which you may disagree with. I would say, I know you're a big Aubameyang fan, but I would say that on the day on Saturday, Saka was Arsenal's most outstanding attacking player. I absolutely loved what I saw from his performance against Liverpool.
He had a good game, but he didn't score that goal that Aubameyang did.
But he did provide the assist, again playing on the right wing, not a position that he's been too familiar with during his time at Arsenal. A delicious raking ball across for Aubameyang. He also could have had another assist moments later with that 1-2 with Eddie and Nketiah when Nketiah's effort was saved by Alisson. I just love the way that Saka is so comfortable in these big games. He just looks completely unruffled by playing against the champions, by playing at Wembley. You wouldn't watch that performance and think, here's a guy who's only entering his second full season as a professional, would you?
Yeah, I wouldn't consider the Community Shield a big game, but he has proved himself on multiple occasions. And yeah, you said it. He's going into a second season, but he looks like he's been playing for multiple years. But I guess all those campaigns he put in the Europa League and the FA Cup, he might have been as good of a player before, but it seems like all of that has helped him really shape him to become an excellent player.
I know you're a big stats man, Malek. You will be delighted to know that his assist on Saturday was Saka's 13th assist since the start of the 2019-20 season, and only 2 players in the Premier League have contributed more assists in all competitions during that period. Do you know who they are?
Trent and KDB.
Yes, that is correct. Was not expecting you to get that one. But isn't that testament to just how sensational Saka's rise has been, that he is now rubbing shoulders with the likes of Kevin De Bruyne in terms of assists?
Yeah, we have to keep in mind that a lot of those assists were in the Europa League, not against Premier League competition, but I'm hoping that he can put up a good performance in the Premier League. I wouldn't expect 13 assists in 38 games, but anything over 6, I'd be happy with.
There are some tough teams in the Europa League. I don't have to keep reminding you of this. Some very, very tough opponents in that league. Obviously, one of the big talking points about Saka after the weekend's game or around the weekend was his non-inclusion in Gareth Southgate's England squad. Good news for Nigeria for now. Were you surprised to see him omitted or to not see him included in that squad?
Yeah. So this past week, we've seen a lot of the European international squads being released, while the African ones will come later. And I feel like that's really putting Africa at a disadvantage because there's the European break, like a few weeks before, they're able to pick these players and claim them. So I would have thought Gareth Southgate would have been thinking in a similar mindset, but I was surprised to see he didn't pick him or Eze to cap-tie them. So either that was an oversight from him, or maybe Saka is undecided. He doesn't want to play for the senior team yet. But he was called up for the U21s.
Yeah, I suspect that Saka won't make his ultimate decision about England versus Nigeria just based on where the Southgate had called him up for these Nations League matches. I suspect that in his heart he knows pretty much where his future lies, and I think it would be. I think if he believes he is keen to represent England, that's where his international future lies. I don't think that had Nigeria played, had Africa had an international window now, and Gernot Rohr had called him up, I don't think he would have made the decision on a whim like that. I just suspect that's not how his mentality works. But yeah, you're right. England not picking him at least gives us another month, 2 months of covering him, and hopefully there's still a chance for Super Eagles to nab him and to bring him into the fold.
Hopefully.
Now let's talk about Eddie Nketiah. I mentioned before he missed that chance fired at Alisson Becker. Overall, another bright, lively performance from him, starting the match. What are you expecting from him this coming season?
It really depends what Arsenal do with Lacazette, how Arteta decides to play Nketiah. Will he start? Will he come off the bench? All of that will really factor into how often he plays and how many goals he ultimately ends up scoring. But regardless of the case, even if he is coming off the bench, given his age, he's still young, it wouldn't stunt his development too much to be coming off the bench and maybe providing a few goals in the season. So I'm excited for him. Are you?
Yeah, I am. I think he offers something a little bit different to the other options. We saw again against Liverpool the way that his work rate is immense. His fitness is superb, and the way he hassles Harry's defenders really gives Arsenal something different. First of all, it kind of constantly creates a situation where chances can emerge because defenders are never able to truly settle. There's always that element. I mean, obviously we don't have crowds at the moment. When we get fans back, there's always that element of nervousness when you've got an opposition striker who's putting constant pressure on your fullbacks, on your centre-backs. So first of all, there's that. But then I think also more broadly looking at Arsenal's approach under Arteta, I think it really is helpful and effective to have a striker, a forward who's setting the tone for the rest of the team in terms of constantly searching to win the ball back, constantly looking to put pressure on the opponents. And I think we saw in the Community Shield how effective that is even against top opposition. There are a lot of good Premier League strikers who haven't managed to ruffle or unsettle Virgil van Dijk quite like Nketiah did on Saturday. We saw last season against Southampton how that pressing can result directly in goals. And I think he'll be a real threat for the Gunners this season.
Yeah, I do want to talk about if, say, he were to be placed at striker and putting Aubameyang onto the left wing, do you think that's worth it? Do you think Aubameyang should be played on the wing as a sacrifice for Nketiah? Should they play together, or should Oba send Nketiah to the bench?
Credit to Aubameyang for how he has adapted to that role on the left flank. At Dortmund, a lot of the time, kind of during those goal-laden seasons in Germany, he wasn't always the main man. He was cutting inside, starting at least in a wider role. So I don't think and he still scored 22 goals last season, even though he was used on the left a lot of the time. It was a transitional campaign for Arsenal. So I think the key thing is that Arsenal have options with Pepe, with Lacazette, with Nketiah, with Saka. That front four, even those guys alone, not even considering Willian, not even considering potential other arrivals, those four guys, there are a lot of different ways you can configure them to get a threat out of three of them, even four of them being on the pitch. So I think that's the most important thing, having guys who give you options. And if you play Aubameyang as a central striker, brilliant. If you play him off the left, I still think he's going to be a major threat.
But don't you think he would provide more goals for the team, or even Arsenal would score more goals as a team with Oba at striker?
Potentially, but I think it's more about how it all fits together. I think if you have, at times last season, towards the end of the campaign, when Arsenal were really gathering momentum under Arteta, he went for a strategy with Aubameyang cutting in off the left, and that really worked effectively. And I think if there is that momentum, if you are beating teams, if he's still scoring, then there's not necessarily the need to change that. If you bring in a talented left-sider who can give a bit more balance and you can shift Aubameyang to the centre, yeah, that may be even more effective. But that's not... There are areas of concern at Arsenal, but that's not one of them for me. One area of concern, though, is the midfield. I know you were delighted to see Mohamed Elneny starting against Liverpool. I'm sure you'll be delighted with the performance he gave against the champions.
I did not watch Arsenal before Elneny came to the club. So ever since he joined, I began watching Arsenal Fan TV after every game, trying to see what people said about him. I watched him in every single game. And now that he's back, it feels so great. I guess you can't associate with this, but the feeling of seeing someone who struggled really to get into the team and being back, although I believe it's a bit of a glorified friendly, just to be on that stage and lift the trophy, I think it's incredibly immense, and it gives me so much to look forward to for next season.
Why did you have that connection with Elneny before he came to Arsenal? Or are you the same about all Egyptian players who have moved to big clubs, or was there something about Elneny and that transfer that really made you want to throw your weight behind the Gunners?
Yeah, more so just Egyptians in general. I didn't really watch him at Basel too much, but just to see him, Salah was in a similar situation when he came to Chelsea, but just someone who was relatively unknown, playing in a small league, coming to one of the biggest clubs in the world. That's always something to look out for.
I remember I was in Egypt in 2006-ish, and obviously Abu Trak's shirts were everywhere, but I was on the outskirts of a city called Mina, and there was a little lad who, they were kids playing football kind of on the side of the road, and there was a little lad who kind of came closer because I think the ball went off the pitch where they were playing, the area they were playing, and he was wearing a kind of counterfeit Tottenham replica shirt. And as he turned around, he had Ghali 14, I think, on the back, Houssem Ghali 14. And it really, as a Spurs fan, it really brought some warmth to my heart. I assume you were really backing Spurs during their era of having Mido and Houssem Ghali in the team.
I was 4 years old, but I was a silent supporter.
Don't put an age limit on passion. I think. Listen, I think youngsters can be massively passionate about football.
Yeah, but to go back to your point, if you're in Egypt and say some club signs an Egyptian, a lot of Egyptians are going to become fans of that team. I remember reading something when Bolton signed JJ Okocha, half the Premier League fans in Nigeria became Bolton fans. So a lot of that stuff can have an impact, but even just for me, who isn't benefiting anything commercially, it's just great to see.
I think maybe that would happen more, for example, when Stefan Sessegnon joined Sunderland, because Benin hadn't had a major Premier League player before that. But I think with Okocha at Bolton, or I think Aguilar at Wigan is another example that stands out. I think already a love for Arsenal and Chelsea, and then to a lesser extent Manchester United, is already quite established in Nigeria, that I don't know how many long-term Bolton fans they were created. But anyway, focusing back on Elneny, there was some surprise that he started that match, because obviously it had been 15 months since he last played for the Gunners, a match against Burnley at the end of the 2018-19 season. A year ago, he moved on loan to Besiktas, had an encouraging campaign in Turkey. But I think, to be honest, most people expected he would be out of the door permanently this summer. Were you expecting him to return to the fold?
I was expecting him to return to preseason, but either be sold or loaned. There's been the strongest report I've heard so far is Serie A side Sampdoria trying to get him on loan. I'm not a fan of loaning out players who aren't young, who don't have much to develop. I don't see how Arsenal would benefit from loaning him out. I think he'd be better served as a bench option. Do you agree?
Well, I mean, going back to what you were saying before, I can remember that Tottenham tried and did loan out Houssem Aouar during his stay at the club, and that did not go well. Not for Tottenham, not for Aouar, not for Hull or Wigan or Derby. Definitely not for Derby or Birmingham. I can't remember who it was, but that did not go to plan, unfortunately, for any parties.
Egypt to England is always a terrible learning curve. Like, there's very few examples of play going directly there.
Getting a lot better. I mean, look at Salah. Obviously, as you could
argue.
Yeah,
no, but there's an intermediary step. I'm saying going from Egypt directly to England, like Ramadan Sobhi did. I think it's too hard for them at the moment.
True, but Aouar came from Netherlands. He was at Feyenoord, so he doesn't have that experience.
Okay.
I would love to say that's the excuse, and I'm sure he probably just told people that's the reason, but I can assure you it's not. One of my favourite players, by the way, Houssem Aouar. So I probably shouldn't badmouth it too much. Doing great work at Guna as well.
I don't think he's watching this.
No, I'll give him a call. I'll get him to check it out. But yeah, focusing back on Elneny, a player who I think is very much walking in Ghali's footsteps to some degree. Do you think he has a role to play at the Gunners this season? Obviously, central midfield has been a bit of a problem area. We have seen Lucas Torreira linked with the exit door. Obviously, Guendouzi and Arteta have had a troubled relationship, and I think his time at the club may be limited. Do you see what kind of role do you see Elneny playing? Do you think Arteta was a bit non-committal about whether he will stay this season? But what do you envisage?
My heart is telling me that he should start, first name in the team sheet, but obviously it's not correct. I can't really realistically see him start consistently in the Premier League. There's a chance he might start in the Premier League opener just due to squad instability after the break. But I think at the end of the day, we're going to see him as a bench option, putting in shifts in the Europa League, the European giants in the Europa League, as you say.
I wonder, I think sometimes there is a tendency, you see less glamorous players like this and you see them as more options for the smaller games. But actually, I think for Arsenal playing those big Premier League games where they are going to be underdogs, there is definitely a place for a disciplined, tenacious, aggressive, composed, hard-working midfielder. We saw it against Liverpool, the way that he evaded the press, the way he was very comfortable on the ball. He wasn't overawed by the occasion. I know you say it was a glorified friendly. I would be inclined to give it a little bit more status than that. And I think from that performance, Arteta will have looked at him and thought, actually, here's a guy in a team that maybe has at times lacked a little bit of character. I think Arteta solved a lot of problems, but we haven't maybe truly seen Arsenal under the cosh going through a bad spell with these youngsters and seeing how they react to that. I actually think there's something to be said for having a guy like that around in a slightly more prominent role even than perhaps you're saying, just giving him tidbits here and there. And I really hope this is kind of a second chance for Elneny. We had a feature on goal from Solis Chukwu, who is really encouraged about the prospect of Elneny sticking around, making an impact. And goal correspondent Charlie Watts also spoke to us and said that he predicts at the moment that it will be Xhaka and Elneny starting Arsenal's first game against Fulham next Saturday. So that would be an amazing turnaround for him. And I think both you and I are hopeful that Elneny can finally make a success of his time with the Gunners. Finally, this may be a little bit of a stupid question, but would you have given him man of the match against Liverpool? I know Ainsley Maitland-Niles ultimately got the award. Some were saying it should have gone to Elneny. Would you have given him the gong? I
would really like some proof over who said that.
Okay, and now looking forward finally to Nicolas Pepe. Didn't play against Liverpool. Coming off the back of a tricky season, we're talking about Arsenal's African players. We can't avoid the 72 million man. Disappointing first season. Is he going to build on that next term?
Overall, you have to look at it as a little bit of disappointment given the transfer fee. He came up with some goals across the season. They added up. Isn't a terrible margin what he ended up with, but there's obviously so much room for improvement, which is the fact that he did what he did this season and he's still expected to do so much more. It gives me a lot of hope.
Yeah, I think he had a direct hand in 18 goals across 42 appearances, which actually isn't bad, like you say, for a player in his first season at a club and such a club who is bit of a basket case during the first half of the season. But obviously both the transfer fee and what he did in France last term, 22 goals, 11 assists, I think much more was expected. It's obviously not a good sign when the club are investigating your transfer and your transfer fee after your first season. That's how no smoke without fire there, Malek. That's how bad I think Gunners' hierarchy have seen feel about that bit of business. But listen, I personally think that I always refer back to the game in March against Everton, that 4-0 victory at Goodison Park, when Pepe was just sensational. And I think if Arteta can manage to get him to that level more often, I think we've seen that Pepe's got it. He can do it in the Premier League. We've seen it. It's not like a guy who's been a shadow of his former self. I think it's just a case of right team, right setup, and hopefully the goal contributions will flow.
Yeah, during this whole episode, I've been trying to wrap my head around how Arsenal will line up with all these Africans. How can they fit every single player into the team? And I think with the addition of Willian, that complicates it quite a bit. People are saying he might play centrally, leaving Pepe on the wing, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see Willian starting on the right wing and Pepe's on the bench for the first game of the season.
I don't know. I think first of all, like I said before, I think it's really good to have options. I think people sometimes get transfixed about what's Arsenal's first team going to be. I think it's actually a bit outdated to kind of look at 1-11 and then changes are made to that. I think actually, particularly versatile coaches like Arteta, like we saw from him towards the end of the season, he can mix it up on a game-by-game basis. He can go 4-3-3. He can go 4-2-3-1. There are different ways of configuring intelligent, versatile players. And a guy like Saka gives you so many options. I mean, we saw him last season on the central left side of a midfield three. We saw him right wing. We of course saw him at left back. And I'm not really too transfixed about how they're going to line up the first choice team for that first game. I just think it'll be great to see that many options. And I actually expect to see Willian used in more of a central role, which I think will. I just don't think you can have a 72 million signing who's not a fairly central part of your starting 11, to be honest.
I hope so. But, first half of the season, he was barely starting. And you could have posed the same question then. But after a season under his belt, you'd hope he's one of the first names on that sheet.
Yeah, and I actually think that having Pepe, having a guy who can go in behind, having a guy who can beat a man, having a guy who can trouble defenders with his pace and really stretch a game, I think it helps the other players. And I think with a guy like Pepe, especially with the fee, I know we keep talking about this, there's an inclination, there is a tendency to just boil it down to the numbers and what he has done. And obviously with that kind of price tag, you're going to be doing that. But actually, if his presence is enabling other players and the results are flowing, I think that's a pretty good situation for Arsenal, at least in the short to medium term.
Yeah. Well, let's take a look at some potential Africans that Arsenal could sign. As we said, they're lacking a bit in the midfield department, and they're looking to reinforce there. We've heard Thomas Partey. We've heard that a lot for many months now. We're not sure whether that will happen. They've also recently been linked to Amadou Diawara at Roma and Houssem Aouar at Lyon. What do you think of these selections, Ed?
Yeah, well, that's kind of the first big caveat on what we're just talking about now, is that, talking about Arsenal starting 11 as well, there's still transfer windows open until early October. So there's still plenty of time for clubs and Arsenal to get in some really big signings who will slot into their first team. Some of the names you mentioned, I think it's quite easy to see how they would fit into the team. Partey, Diawara, obviously Dani Ceballos, we're expecting him to return. That's not a done deal yet, but it's imminent. Obviously they've already signed Willian and Gabriel. And also William Saliba, who's French Cameroonian, is also coming, and I think that will solve a problem in the heart of the defence. Diawara is a signing that makes a lot of sense to me. I think Roma have some financial difficulties. I think they're looking to raise funds. I think either Diawara or Jordan Veretout will be on their way this month. And I think for a fee of 15-20 million, I think Diawara could represent a real steal. He's 23, but he's already got maybe 4 seasons of Serie A kind of regular playing under his belt. He signed for Roma from Napoli last season. He's a player with room to grow. And I think it would be an absolutely magnificent addition, regardless really of whether Arsenal sign Partey.
Don't you think it would look bad on Diawara if, he spends like 1 or 2 seasons in Napoli, goes to Rome, spends a season there, and then transfers again? Doesn't that really look bad for players if they can't solidify a spot in the team?
It can do, but as I said, there is context here that Roma are in a tricky financial situation, that they need to raise funds. And therefore, and actually a move to Arsenal, it's not like he's making a sideways move within Serie A. He's moving to the Premier League, he's moving to London, he's moving to the FA Cup holders. So I don't think the criticisms that could be levelled at players after moving after one season really would be applicable in this situation. And also, I'd love to see him working with Arteta. So in terms of his career and those kind of, he's not settling, he's not really establishing himself, I think actually Diawara would be stronger for that. He was linked with the move to Tottenham. I think Tottenham were looking at him in January. Spurs obviously have some well-documented problems at the base of their midfield. And I think either of the two North London heavyweights could benefit from a player of his qualities.
As for Aouar, I don't know why these two parties have been linked so much, but every day you hear something new about him and Arsenal. And even people are saying he could play as a 10 instead of Willian. I'm not really sure how he would fit in or if he's necessary for this team. Do you agree?
I think he'd be an asset. I think Xhaka, you know what you get. Elneny's not going to unlock defences. Ceballos has shown that he's more capable of doing that, obviously. But I don't think really at his creative best he could match Aouar. And I think Houssem Aouar on the left side of a midfield 3 in a 4-3-3 formation would be a really valuable asset. We saw last season with Lyon how Aouar was capable of operating in various different positions, higher up the pitch, in a wider role as well. He's an intelligent player, very technically proficient. I think he's a player who would be an asset. I don't think obviously we're talking about kind of fantasy land that they'll get Partey and Diawara and Aouar, but I think any of those three would be valuable additions, considering that actually Torreira, Guendouzi, Willock maybe aren't viable options for Arteta moving forward.
Yeah. Well, I feel all three of these players are in different price ranges. Diawara, you said 10 to 15 million. Partey is somewhere 40.
I think for Diawara.
Okay. Partey around 40 to 50, and then Aouar is probably at least 60. So we don't know why Arsenal haven't been able to get Partey yet. It seems that they're still apart from Atletico on what they want for the player. So we're not really sure what's going to happen on that front. But in terms of who would make the team the best?
Arsenal may well have assets to sell as well. You look at Torreira, Guendouzi, Bellerin's been linked with the exit door. Lacazette's been linked with the exit door. They can probably offload a central defender now. They've brought in Saliba. So actually, there are assets to sell there. So I don't know if necessarily those price tags would be prohibitive.
Who do you think if one player were to be added to the squad and immediately inserted into the starting 11, who do you think could propel this squad the most into top 4 or Europa League spot?
I think it has to be Partey for me. I think Partey has the obviously. Are we discounting Lionel Messi or just African focus?
I think Partey would be better. It's more of a well-rounded player. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know about that. Maybe, possibly. He's got age on his side, I guess. Yeah. I do think Partey would settle quickly and easily in the Premier League. I think he looks like a Premier League midfielder to me, and he's already proved it consistently. Champions League knockout stages, played in the Champions League final, of course, and he is a leading man at a leading European club. I think defensively, his stats are better than Diawara's. And I think that would solve an immediate problem there. Offensively, he's not going to give you as much in the way of adventurous passes going forward as Diawara would, for example. Even though I wouldn't say that's his key strength either. But I think Partey is a guy who comes in, he commands a starting role in a midfield 3, I would imagine, and then you've got your central component to build a team around him. I don't think Diawara, 23, he's a guy you build a team around. And I think there are question marks about Aouar, how he would perhaps adapt to the Premier League. I think he had a hand in 7 goals last season for Lyon, which isn't exceptional. So there are question marks there as well.
A lot of interesting possibilities for Arsenal. We're going to finish off the episode by predicting where they will finish the season. What do you think?
5th.
I'm going to say that too, but with a decent trip in the Europa League.
Yeah, I think people are kind of talk about City and Liverpool as being leagues away from everyone else. But if I was a fan of Chelsea, if I was a fan of Arsenal, if I was a fan of United, I would be much more optimistic than I was in March about being able to close that gap and being able to bridge the distance that seemingly exists to the top 2. As a Tottenham fan, I'm not so optimistic about the club's ability to do that, but I think for the other 3, there are definitely things which I would hang my hat on and say we're going to be better this season than we were last season.
Yeah, Arsenal and Spurs definitely have a lot of room for improvement, and it's almost certain that they'll improve their standing. But whether or not they can make it into a European spot is up for the question.
Great. Well, that's been a fantastic in-depth look at Arsenal, what to expect this season, what to expect from the African players. Malek has a little more of a soft spot for the Gunners than I do, but I think we are both very excited about seeing what happens this term. And of course, we will enjoy covering, reporting on, and celebrating the achievements of the African players at the Emirates Stadium.